Parliament, DADAB, also a panel of speakers in Parliament. We shall be joined by Dr. Makalimolu, who is a member of Parliament, Kitui Central, also Isaac Maura, who is a politician as well. You get to drive the show with me. You can hit us on Twitter. KTN News is our Twitter handle, KTN News KE. Also, you can follow me at Dibal INAM. So let's just put this horse into full run by looking at the dailies this morning, what you're waking up to on the front page of the dailies today, beginning with the bold paper, is all about DP Gachagua's tough new job and also Matters Academy Junior Secondary School, what to expect. This is what we had earlier on the online version of the Standard as well. And hard copy is focusing on the DP Gachagua's new tough job, the deputy president who has been calling for reforms in agriculture so that farmers get guaranteed minimum returns, and dismantling of state capture now has the chance to do exactly that for the valid coffee sector. The story is well covered for you on page 4 and 5 of the Standard. And Matters Academy as well, on education as parents prepare for reopening of schools in 2 weeks. The government has promised to provide books and learning resources to the tune of 7 billion shillings to calm anxiety over implementation of new curriculum. Is what you have on page 6 today, this morning. Everyone is a bit antsy to see how this will shake into place as well. A new development in our curricula with the junior secondary school. So you have all the details on what you are expected to know inside the Standard today. And as I mentioned earlier, Gachagua's get tough role in Ruto reorganization. The deputy president who has been calling for reforms in agriculture, as I mentioned, so that farmers get guaranteed minimum returns and dismantling of state capture, now has a chance to do exactly that for the valued coffee sector. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Standard today. Raila, he says, I have met Uhuru 3 times to plan Azimio future. So this is just trying, of course, to countermand what has been in the gallery, in the public gallery, as far as the future of Azimio is concerned, and also the leadership of Uhuru Kenyatta within Azimio. They held talks in Mombasa discussing a raft of issues that you can follow through on page 7 of the Standard this morning, so that you get the feel and flavor of where Azimio is right now, even as we eagerly wait to get to hear from the Right Honorable himself regarding the future and the direction of Azimio. And teachers' murder linked to killing of U.S. nurses, another story that you want to follow on page 3 of the Standard this morning. Let's see what we have on the teaser on top here. Court orders liquidation of Saiton funds. Lastly, they're calling now for liquidation. If you've been following, of course, what has been happening with Saiton regarding some of investments that have come to question so far, and people not really getting the return for their money. Now the court is ordering liquidation of Saiton funds in order to curb this as well. You can follow the story on page 10 of the Standard this morning. Revenue crisis facing counties. This is on page 21 of the Standard today. Every Wednesday, or every Tuesday, I should say, every Tuesday have Financial Standard coming your way. And today is focusing on the titanic battle for Safaricom's soul. Right? And you can see that is a game of chess right now regarding the uncoupling of Safaricom's telcos and M-Pesa. And you saw also yesterday on one of the dailies that was Business Daily regarding also the the capital gain tax that also they have backbays and fears about. But you can follow this story inside the Financial Standard today. KRA targets 20 billion shillings capital gains. KRA targets 20 billion shillings capital gains. That comes into effect, of course, this month in a bid to try and expand that tax bracket. This is what they are targeting, 20 billion shillings from capital gains. That story on page 24 of the Standard this morning. This is how it looks. Make sure you grab a copy for that. But before we head over to the front page of other dailies, I just need to show you these faces. Rigathi Gachagua. He will spearhead reforms in coffee sector. Previously under Agriculture Ministry, where cartels rule to deny farmers better prices. So that is what he will actually be turning his focus on to make sure there are reforms there. We have also Zachariah Njeru, who's the Land and Housing Cabinet Secretary. He gets the State Department of Housing, Urban Development and Public Works. We have Moses Kuria, Investment and Trade Ministry. CS gets 3 state departments instead of the previous 2. Another addition on his cap as well. And we have Kipchumba Murkomen. He loses key department but gains NTSA. You can read all about it inside the Standard this morning. This happened yesterday, the executive order from the president with the reorganization of government for him to make sure that, of course, everything runs smoothly as far as delivery of his mandate is concerned. So every person is put where they'll deem to be, of course, fitting snugly to make sure he realizes his dream and execute the plan, which is his manifesto. Also, Martinez to bend backwards in quest to lead Portugal. Roberto replaces Santos, who resigned after Portugal's defeat at World Cup. This is all about sports inside the Standard as well on page 40 this morning. This is how it looks. The Daily Nation up next. And this is what you're waking up to today. Graft roadblock for job seekers is a splash this morning. Poor score. Kenya was ranked 124 on Transparency International's corruption index. Seems we continue to do dismally on that particular front. And there are proposed law changes. There will be no place for corrupt people in public service at any level. Not only will everybody seeking employment in national or county governments get vetted by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, but the agency's recommendation will be binding on employers. And this story is on page 7. Of course, we've seen lots of cases in regard to some of the previous employers who were ousted by the current incoming governors as well. And this is bound to also cut the particular eventuality when there is a transition. So everyone has a bugbear and fear when there is a new administration coming in. Will this also try and tame it? You can read all about it inside the Daily Nation this morning. And spending too much time online is bad for your brain. It's all about social media danger to teenagers, and they're listing here some of the difficulties and how, or some of the red flags that you need to know about the social media as well. One, difficulties in cognitive emotion regulation, impulsivity, impaired cognitive function, addiction to social networking, shyness, and low self-esteem that is exacerbated with social media, according to this revelation. Also, secondly, medical problems, including sleep problems, reduced physical fitness, and healthy eating habits, pain and migraines, reduced cognitive control, and changes in the brain's gray matter volume. This is also one of the key areas that you need to be aware of, on how also is changing the networking there, the neural parts within your brains as well. That is all about the gray matter volume. Thirdly, some children may get depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, that is OCD, also attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and alcohol use disorder as well. That can also be another key problem that can occur on that particular front. And teens who always have their smartphones have addictive use of social media, giving them a sense of fear of missing out. That is, of course, the well-known acronym there, FOMO, fear of missing out. You want to be always in the loop. What is happening? You don't want to miss out on information. When you wake up in the morning, that is a fast go-to place that you want to get all acquainted and get intimately familiar with all information so that you are, of course, in the know. That is all laid out for you on page 3 of the Standard of the Daily Nation, I should say, this morning, on the effects of social media on teenagers. On the sidebar, winners and losers in Ruto's new order. President William Ruto has reorganized his government after just 3 months, splitting some key ministries into more state departments. You have the story well laid out for you on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also, there is DN2 there, powering SMEs, how Joseph Kamata is nurturing generation of musicians. Find out all about it inside the Daily Nation this morning. And Healthy Nation, about GMOs, separating the facts from the myths and lies. This has been a debate that is still rife in the country so far. And food security. So can you read all about the myths and lies about it inside the Daily Nation this morning? This is how it looks. We shall be, of course, looking at it much later in the course of the program. Up next is a star. And we're talking about Musalia, and of course, him being given much more duties with the current regime. He's a man to watch as Ruto tweaks roles. It says here, that is a splash that he's working up to on the front page of a Star this morning. There is supremacy battles, though, puts the former vice president at center of running government. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star. Now, the new roles are well enumerated for you here. We have Gachagua's new roles: deputized president in execution of functions. We have chair cabinet committees, oversees implementation of cabinet decisions, coordinate intergovernmental relations. We have chair intergovernmental budget and economic council. Also liaise with commissions and independent officers in matters that require government intervention. And looking on, we try and just zoom out. Mudavadi's new role is here. We try and zoom in so that we can read together. And it says here, assist president and deputy president in supervision of ministries. Also coordinate and implement policies with Interior Ministry. Coordinate government legislative agenda across ministries, chair PSS committees, also supervise technical monitoring and evaluation of government policies and programs. Also perform any other function assigned by president. That is still an open check for him as well, as far as performing any other function assigned by the president is concerned there. And this is a splash Musalia to watch as Ruto tweaks roles. He gains more muscle in terms of government roles. Now, 5 suspects in Chiloba murder detained for 21 days. Of course, you've been seeing the hue and cry that has been coming from the queer community. Court in Eldoret has allowed police to detain 5 suspects as part of a probe into the murder of LGBTQ activist. There is Adrian Kiprotich Kipto, Elias Chiloba, Senior Principal Magistrate Richard Ondenyo granted the police 21 days to hold the suspects to facilitate the completion of investigations. And Kenya tests alternative malaria drug amid growing resistance. The current drug of choice to treat malaria is expected to fall in place in some years to come. And with this reality, Kenya researchers have now increased their focus on alternative medicines, which can be deployed quickly in case the current drugs become ineffective. This alternative set of drugs is the DHA PPQ combination or the hydroartemisinin, that is a piperacquine combination. You can read all about it inside the Star this morning. Let's see what we have on the teaser up here. And there are tough 30 days for Uhuru to decide future and quit Azimio. Politics or PACs? That is a probing question. Politics or PACs? Tough questions there. And we've seen that they had discussion with Raila Odinga in Mombasa. But here we are given another direction there. There are tough 30 days for Uhuru to decide future and quit Azimio. Will he not? Or will he stay in Azimio? That is a probing question. And of course, we shall be hearing from a panelist this morning as well. This is a Star for you. Let's see what we have on the front page of the People Daily. Mudavadi, Ruto's real power man, is a splash this morning. Ruto's real power man cabinet duty. President assigns former deputy premier critical and visible roles at the heart of government that threaten to overshadow those of DP Gachagua in revised order. And this is a story on page 4 of the People Daily. Right, so is it overshadowing the DP? That is a probing question. is Musalia Mudavadi given more prominence in this government than the deputy president? Well, at least going by what the People Daily is trying to showcase here, that seems to be the direction. You can read all about it inside the People Daily this morning, and you can see a related picture there. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi chatting with their boss, President William Ruto, during the retreat by government officials at the Nyuki Hotel last week to take stock of the Kenya Kwanza development plan. That is what we have on the front page of the People Daily this morning. Uhuru Raila secret meeting sparks BBI talks is another story on page 2 of the People Daily. And capital gain tax to hurt real estate. Experts are warning aggressive tax measures that start this month likely to make life difficult for investors not registered at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. As we saw, KRA is targeting 20 billion shillings capital gains, and that comes into effect this month. So there's also, of course, this particular sector of the economy that will feel the pinch of this tax, of course, expansion. You can read all about it on page 15 of the People Daily. That is the People Daily. Let's see what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. Mudavadi apanda bei. This is what it says. Mudavadi apanda bei. Ruto ampokeza majukumu ya kushirikisha idara ya serikali ya kitaifa. Naibu Rais akipewa county. It's all about politics, siasa kwenye agizo la rais lililotolewa jana. Mkuu wa mawaziri ametwikwa majukumu yenye hadhi ya kitaifa, kwa mfano kushirikisha utendakazi wa idara mbalimbali za serikali kama vile bunge na baraza la mawaziri. You can follow the story on page 2 of Taifa Leo this morning, and also all the duties are all listed there. We don't need to belabor that. You can follow the story on page 2 of Taifa Leo today. Mudavadi apanda bei. Looking on top here, mauaji ya Chiloba, watu watano kati ya watoto watatu wafikishwa kotini kwa kifo cha mtetezi wa ushoga. And Uhuru akutana na Raila kisiri. Vinara wa Azimio wakutana, ila haijabainika iwapo Kenyatta atajiuzulu. This story continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo this morning. Let's see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. Ruto puts Uhuru's most expensive road on hold. That is what you're waking up to on the front page of the Business Daily. New regime said to be cagey about tolling of this important league. Consortium of contractors ready to start. And it says President William Ruto has put the construction of 160 billion shillings Mau Summit Highway on ice, throwing contractors and funders of what is Kenya's most expensive road project into a spin. Initiated by retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, the construction of the 233-kilometer Nairobi-Nakuru Mau Summit Toll Road that was initially meant to kick off in September 2021 has been awaiting the approval of President Ruto. You can read all about it on page 2 of the People of the Business Daily. And global banks see Kenya's growth dropping below 5%. Expansion in Kenya's economic activity is projected to slip below 5% this year on the back of prolonged dry weather, persistent inflationary pressure, and rising borrowing costs, signaling a gloomy employment outlook for growing skilled youth. Well, that is the gloomy affair, and you can read all about it on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Kenya's food imports bill hit 5-year high on biting drought. Kenya's food import bill in the first 9 months of last year hit a record high since 2017, driven by a major drop in local production due to prolonged drought. Is another story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily. Now, half of Nairobi Security Exchange firms not paying dividends. Nearly half of Nairobi Security Exchange listed firms did not pay dividends in the last financial year cycle, revealing muted returns for investors in the bounce, and Saiton liquidation ordered to recover 14 billion shillings investor funds. That is a story that you want to follow on page 2 of the Business Daily this morning. All right, I'm just to cross over to Rwanda, where we have the New Times, and doggedly following what is happening on DR Congo, the security or insecurity there. We have Kagame saying that we're going to make sure DR Congo is not Rwanda's problem. We're going to make sure DR Congo is not Rwanda's problem. And this is the president of Rwanda speaking. We can see him delivering His remarks following the swearing-in of new Senate President Francois Xavier Khalinda at the parliamentary buildings in Kigali on Monday, January the 9th. Speaking about the current crisis in eastern DR Congo, Kagame stressed that he will not allow Rwanda to carry its neighbor's burden and be insulted and abused every day. That story on page 3 of the New Times. Right, I shall be showing you what we have on the Economist, of course, the Newsweek and down the dailies internationally. But for now, I just want to rope in Farah Maalim. We have also Dr. of course, Makalimulu, and we'll be joined later by Isaac Maura as well to just slice and dice the current state of play of the politics in the country so far, and just to get a feel and flavor of where we're headed this year as far as the economy is concerned, as far as also politics is concerned, and the social aspect of our pillar is concerned in the society. Farah Maalim, good morning.
Morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And thank you for joining us, Dr. Makal. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good.
Yeah, so it's still everyone is expressing the felicitations for the new year, the crossover.
Yes.
How was it for you? Good to see you.
Well, it was good for me, and busy also, very busy. I was back at home, so we had a by-election in Garissa.
Yes. How was it, by the way?
Well, a good one.
That was your home turf.
Yeah.
You were in Duale, used to actually.
We were slugging it.
Particular thing.
We were slugging it out there. We were slugging it out there, and despite the use of a lot of money, it was like a market basically.
It was like a market.
Like a market where you sell people. But then it's you could say it was fairly free. Fairly free.
But given now that was
this is probably in many elections, this is one of the ones which I think was that was fair, free. Yeah.
It was okay.
Fair and free, yeah. And the margin was much less than what they announced. The margin was just 1,000.
But of course, you didn't expect to upset the apple cart. Yes,
no. Frankly speaking, by midday, by 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, they were trading with basically with thousands. But then of course they brought in tons and tons of money, and it is you can't blame people for doing what they have to do to get what they want to get.
But how sure are you they were bringing tons?
But it's a fair one. I think there was no incident. There was nothing. I mean, it went well. I mean, that's how an election should take place, by and large. So we put in a fight.
Yeah.
I had put in a serious fight myself because I believe that there were previous other serious riggings. But this one I can say
it was free and fair.
Fair, yes.
Fantastic.
In future we have to really work on the use of money for elections in this country, because that's where the problem is. That's where a big problem is.
But
somebody would ask you. Somebody can ask you, why don't you get your own money here also?
But now when you have the sporting chance in Parliament to actually rectify this with campaign financing, that one really goes down the tube.
Yeah.
When it comes to it really affecting you when you are in the current Parliament, then it seems some of this legislation will never see the light of day.
Yeah. I mean the serious substantive legislations that let me be honest with you, Parliament has suffered quite a beating over the last good number of years, and it's only fair now we try and reclaim some of that. It was a vibrant institution before. It might have not gotten everything it wanted, but it was there to put the record straight. At the very least, the debates were so lively, the issues were so pertinent, and so relevant, that you were educating also the masses in the process. We were educating the masses, we were involving the masses in the national debate in the previous, for example, the 10th Parliament, 9th, 8th, all the way down. Even when we had a single party, a de jure one party, we still had a very, very vibrant Parliament, which was fairly independent, in many ways. Because you're younger, but I think he remembers that. You remember the death of all these commissions when the late J.J. What is Gigi? Yeah, no.
JJ Karaoke.
JM
Karaoke was assassinated.
JM Karaoke assassinated. When Oko also was killed in what was believed to be state orchestrated, a lot of things. There was always a very powerful parliament there. I remember the likes of Shikuku, the likes of Serenay, the likes of that lady also from Chelagat Matai. Jem himself before that was a very powerful voice. And then we came into the 7th Parliament when we really had what was called the Young Turks. I had the pleasure of being one of those ones, actually the youngest of the Young Turks. And we did a good job there. We really held the country, the government to task, the government to account. And then there were also some serious sages in the House, and people who cut across the political divide and who were respected for what they were. I met Lawrence Sigini. I met the late Lawrence Sigini, Kibaki as a member of parliament that time, Onyonka, Echai, people who had been through all these things. And
was it Zachary Onyonka?
Zachary Onyonka was and somebody in his own, a very sharp guy. And when they're talking, contributing on the floor of the House, you would have a pin drop silence. Anyona, George, the late George Anyona was there. And so we really had, the debates were good. And then there were the young mavericks, the real mavericks. There were those ones who were reformists, but also young, Kretu Murungi, serious reformists, Paul Muite, Orengo, Obocha, Henry Obocha, Professor Kitui, myself. There were also all these people who were very well educated and very sharp in their own rights and very well versed with everything, including global issues, and who really wanted to have nothing short of the best for our country. Although, of course, that was also during the Cold War, the rollover. That was the end of communism. We came in when communism had died. And then we had the, perestroika, glasnost, I don't know if you remember those things. And the Russian nation, or USSR, the Soviet was splinting also, slowly. And so the world over was human rights and democracy. That was the narrative. Human rights, democracy, and it was good. With also certain missions that had very, very people who were posted in here as ambassadors, but who are not career ambassadors, who are media people. For example, Smith Hempston was a media guy, so he did not hesitate to have his opinion always on the front page. Another guy who was called Munzelbach, who was ambassador for Germany, who was also playing a serious catch-up, efforts to be relevant too, was trying to do exactly what Hempston. So times were different. Times were very different across the board. So, but now you cannot. The parliament is too big.
Because I was coming to that right now, because I think now you're giving us this rich seam of history.
Yes.
And now you're coming to, the epic of time right now, this dispensation. Do you in any way feel that there's such an intellectual vacuity that maybe compared to what you've given us, even the pedigree of those leaders that we had right now, in comparison to where you are then as a young Turk and right now, is there such a wide chasm that needs to be bridged?
Big one. We had people powerful in their own rights, and some were conservatives, pro-establishment, and others were revolutionaries from outside who wanted to change, and still the debate was there. There was a massive, mutual respect between different people. There was also one very, very sad, experience that time, because I had known Matiba when he was a minister and a businessman. He was a very sharp guy, very, very eloquent and smart in his own right. But this time he had a stroke. So basically it was a shell of his original self. And he used to come for technical appearance, and you could not engage with him in anything substantive. And you really feel like you're close to tears every time you sit with him, and you see him now completely different with the stroke and everything else, and with the drools and the rest. But beyond that, I mean, those days were. And
everyone alludes that to a political instigation that this particular stroke does not just come by happenstance.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Matiba, in his self, unquestionably was going to be the next president. He had a massive following, and actually he had to be stopped, otherwise he was going to win the elections in 1992. They stopped him from going to certain parts of mountain region. But other than that, and he came only 400,000 votes, close to less than 400,000 votes, was what divided between him and the president who came in that time, Moi. And he had not visited a lot. He had just visited just a few places. He was kind of restricted. This Kanu zone, this is that.
Had he been to every nook and cranny, then that will have
well, I'm not quite sure, because I think, but he was going to win, but that was going to be a disaster because the man was hardly himself, but still was able to move crowds and get votes the manner he got them. Then it's a question that everybody wants to ask. If he had become the president, then what would be the future of the country?
Fantastic.
You see.
Let me rope in Honorable Makali on this as well. Maybe just to begin from where you're coming from, how's Kitui Central as well? You can give us just a feel and flavor so far. You are on a long recess as parliamentarians until February of 13th. That is where after Valentine's actually.
Yeah, after Valentine's.
So they consider that as well on the calendar.
Thank you, Dubar, and Happy New Year, viewers. It's good to host us with my deputy party leader.
Yeah. I feel like this is a white power party.
At the same time,
PG.
My speaker. Yeah. It's good to see you and to see Honorable Farah. The festive season was good. I was able to go to Kitui for actually about 10 days. And this time, I must say, the good thing is we are very hopeful. The rains, are with us down there. So even as we try to survive through Christmas, we're hopeful that we'll get a good harvest. But towards the end of the year, we were getting very worried that the rains were now kind of disappearing. But thank God, this week, just last week, we had more rains. So I can tell you, Kitui Central, now we are all smiling. We are likely to have some good harvest. Yes. And that is very good for us. Our people had gone through hell. For the last 3 years, we never had rains. So a lot of problems. Although there are still parts of Kitui County which are still have not received enough rain. But I think that is good that at least some parts you get food, and then we can share with our brothers and sisters. But generally, we had a nice time. We were able to share the little we have with our people. And we thank God that we have a new year. This year, we are hopeful that it will not be like 2022. 2022 was also an election year. So lots of challenges with the drought, with food shortages, with all what was happening. The political climate was not very good, although we went through the elections. So let's see how the year goes. But from where I sit, and I'm an economist.
Yes.
It still doesn't look very, very good from an economic perspective. But let's be hopeful that once people get food. The other day I went down with my party leader to western part of Kenya and the part of the North Rift. And then we could see a lot of food on the farms. So I'm imagining if you combine that with the little we are getting in Ukambani and another part of the country, we might be getting to a level where we say with some food. We minimize the shortages. In that case, the prices. Although I'm really worried that despite us claiming we have food in Western Kenya, North Rift, and even parts of Ukambani now, the price of maize, the balance, has refused to come down completely. A bag of maize is now still retailing at around 6,000 plus. I think this is the first time Kenyans are buying a bag of maize over 6,000. Normally to go be around 3,500 and then come down to 2. This time it is 6,000 plus. And that really worries much in terms of prices, because, you know, inflation, you can see now we're almost hitting 10%. And I can tell you for sure, when things go that way, then generally the common mwananchi, the Wanjikus, the Musiokas and all that will normally suffer, because prices keep on shooting. And really, we are praying that things stabilize. We've seen the government has now, to some extent, they have now started planning for the country. And I will really be looking forward to see how things move. But I agree with what Honorable Farah said, looking at just the recent by-elections. I didn't participate in any because they were in different areas, but we were able to read the papers, we were able to get also feelers from our colleagues who come from those areas. The issue of campaign financing still remains an issue in this country. Last Parliament, we tried to legislate on it, but at some point, I could see we were not very keen on it. So it's like Parliament was not very keen to get it passed, and I was part of that team. I didn't know why, but you know, in Parliament and
because it could affect you somehow
during campaigns. Actually, some of us were celebrating that we really wanted it, but you know, others were saying the figures which had been put there were too low, and they might not even manage people go through campaigns. Others were saying the figures were too high.
They were not realistic.
Yeah, they were not realistic. So these issues came up, and then we would not go through the bill. But I think now this time, with all what we have witnessed in different parts of this country, and what we have gone through ourselves, you know, we have not gone through a campaign. And I can tell you, it is really extremely expensive to campaign in this country. Extremely expensive. How I wish that now this time we get that law through, so that the 2027 elections, we are able to go through those elections with a bit of some framework to control how to finance campaigns. And because from where I sit normally, another problem we have with campaign financing is that to some extent is also the cause of corruption in the country. You know, it's not easy to go through this using your own resources. So you end up really doing fundraising through friends, and at times through contractors. So you might find that at the end of the day, you have what we call contractors capture, that you are already in power, but those people who are business people have already funded you to an extent that you don't have a lot of room to say no to their demands. And then you start kind of playing around with the systems to make sure that you also reward them. Because at the end of the day, and we all agree, anybody who is a politician will agree this politics is about interest. So it's not easy for you now to give me your own 3-4 million to go and campaign, and you just say, I want to donate my 4 million. There will always be some hidden interest somewhere that I will give you this. And when you get to power, then I would imagine and that's why you see at times it becomes very tricky. You see that most of the leaders have actually been captured to some extent. That's why you see we have talked about cartels. We talk about inner kitchen cabinets. We talk about this inner circle. You know, everybody has like an inner team. That inner team is normally what would really then control the leadership in most countries. And that's why you see, the other day, I remember when we were here with you, the bar, we were debating a situation where somebody had been given a very senior post in this country, and that person has a number of court cases. I don't want to mention names. You remember we raised that matter. And we were being told he has been a very serious campaign manager, he had done this. But the position that would be given is a very serious position in terms of, very central in terms of revenue generation in this country, and then at the same time, court cases are there, alluding to corruption. So to me, I think these are the issues that if we got it right in terms of campaign financing, so that we put to a level where individuals could easily campaign using their own resources, or if not so, a very clear mechanism in terms of how do you raise your finances, and it's meant open, so that at the end of the day, then nobody will be able to control. At the same time, it also open doors for those leaders who are very good in this country, but have not been able to be elected because they don't have finances. You know, there are some people who are naturally good leaders. They are educated, they have what it takes to be a leader, but basically because they don't have money, you go to the electorate,
money talks.
Electorate, and they tell you, we are sorry.
Cases you know, the good book says also a poor man's wisdom is despised. Yeah, so it can be. you see. You can have all the wisdom in the world, but still, if you're poor.
This young man who has come from, is it Butere? Where did he come from?
Which one?
This guy who...
Oh, yeah, Selassie.
Eh?
Selassie.
Okay, yes.
He had 500 shillings in his pocket when he got elected.
Yes.
So there are also many cases, and there are many young people who have been elected into this parliament who did not necessarily have a lot of money, but who commanded the sympathy and the love of the people for whatever reasons. Maybe just because they're poor and they're out there seeking the same things that. Let me tell you one thing, Dibala. In statecraft, there's certain ways things are performed. Nixon, what was his name? Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm. Richard Nixon was going to be impeached because of the Watergate scandal, and he had done a lot of awful things. Yeah, he misused to an abuse of the office that he had at that time. But then he resigned and allowed his number two. The one who was going to take over from him was called Spiro Agnew. Spiro Agnew also had some scandal, I think, a tax-related scandal, and he had to resign. So he picked up somebody from the House of Representatives, Gerald Ford, to become his deputy. And in a quick sequence, he also had to leave the press. So Gerald Ford became the president. His first executive order was to pardon Nixon. You get my point?
Yes.
So if you have those powers as a head of state, as a head of state can forgive you for whatever, anything. If you have those powers, then when somebody exercises for some of his old friends who helped him in politics, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You get my point? What Uhuru did was in itself very questionable, because he packed the government with his people just before he left. You get my point? He packed it everywhere. Appointed his people.
Hopefully, maybe there was a reason behind it.
Well, basically, he wanted to reward...
And continuity.
Yes, he wanted to reward his friends and expect them to stay there. I mean, that's to say the least, that is...
if Azimio took over.
Yeah, he was hoping that Azimio would take over.
So, he was just being strategic.
And then they were going to stay there. But he was not doing it for the country. He was doing it for his friends. And 90% of them were from his own backyard. 90% of them were from his own backyard. They were all from the Mantu region. So this guy comes in now, and what do you expect him to do? To stay with the old what they call flock, whose allegiance was to somebody else? No. He'll come and clean the slate. You know what I mean? Tell them, okay, pack off and go. And the good thing is that he's not replacing them with 100% Kalenjins by his backyard. He's replacing them with Kenyans from across the board. And actually more than any other community was the Mantu region right now. Am I right? He's given a lot of appointments to people from the Mantu region because he's rewarding them for the support he got from them. Because he got massive support from there. He's the president of the Republic of Kenya today, courtesy of the support he got from those people. So he can pardon, he can direct for certain matters that he believes were politically instigated to be reviewed. And if you're there in the prosecution and you're told to review this matter by the president, I mean, what does that mean? What does that mean? Withdraw the charges. You get my point? Enter nolle prosequi. You get my point? So basically, whatever is happening right now is fair in a democracy. But the kind of things that are really the American House of Representatives, for a country that's over 400 million, 480 million, I think. You know how many there are? 435.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know the exact figures.
I think they're 435. Do you know how many we are? In the lower house, whatever you call the House of the equivalent of the House of Representatives, with a tenure of with a term of 5 years. They have only 2 years. If you're a congressman yourself, and a representative from any of those constituencies, you're there only for 2 years. After 2 years, you go for election. Progressively, keep on going for elections. Here we have 5 years, and we are 349 in that lower house. Most people don't want it to be called lower house, but I think for traditionally, we cannot reinvent the wheel again. The lower house is much more powerful than the upper house in most cases. But then we have 349 for a population of less than 50 million. less than 50 million.
Yep.
And they have a population of, they have 433 for a 435 for a population of 480 million. You get my point? 10 times our size. If we have 480 million, we'll probably be having 3,490 members of parliament today. We look like the Chinese, what do you call it? People's Assembly. You know, where they sit only a few times in a year.
Twice
in a year, and you can see how it is. So I think we got a few things wrong, but that's there. I mean, we cannot. The good thing is that the Constitution limits this now.
Well, speaking to some of the legislators that we had yesterday, also they think that it's a time that this country we had a constitutional audit. Since we promulgated this constitution, because a lot of the issues that have been very ticklish also in this country, they are emanating from the framework of the constitution. And I don't know, do you think it is high time that as a country also we need, moving forward, to actually audit the constitution?
I agree with
you. You totally agree?
I totally agree with them. For example, I have a problem with a government that's outside parliament. You see, I don't even know some of the names of the ministers right now, the cabinet ministers. They have authority without accountability. How do you ask a question and expect to get an answer from a member of parliament whose role is, what is the role of member of parliament? The role of a member of parliament is one, representation, oversight, and scrutiny. And then you ask him a question, why don't I have security in my place? Why don't I have this thing? And the chair of the committee comes and he has to be told by the government from the office there. He has serious limits into how much information he can have access to. He has no authority in the manner in which he cannot direct, change this, do this, send these officers there. He can't do that. And you have a minister who has all those powers, but he's not accountable to anybody.
Well, he will be accountable now to Parliament.
How?
Yeah, when you are meaning the
he has to be accountable. You see, one is I totally disagree with the concept of having ministers coming from outside Parliament to begin with, because when they are there as ex officio, and I have 20-something of them as ex officio, people who come into the Parliament and ask questions and everything else, and they are not members of Parliament, by the way. But they still have to answer questions and be accountable to the parliament. You have issues there. You see, that's strict. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel again. That strict process of accountability of such civil servants through the committee process. They are civil servants, basically. And you make them accountable through the committee processes. In the olden days, you have a minister who sits in parliament, but you have a committee, a relevant committee that can summon the permanent secretary, the deputy secretaries, the regional commissioner. They summon all those people and make them, ask them questions and put up a report when they feel that the government is not doing enough on certain issues. But now, if you have to, that same person has to answer questions because the minister, for all intents and purposes, is not a member of parliament. So they'll come in as ex officio, but now on the floor of the House. Not in the committee room. You get my point? So there's a modeling up of basically the manner in which you're going to do that. And it's going to be one of its own in the whole world.
Right.
We don't have that anywhere else.
Honorable Makali, maybe you should also educate me, because what is that about difference does it make that now you're not really appearing before the House committee, where you're appearing before, the entire parliament?
The plenary.
Yeah, the plenary. I mean, what's the difference?
Maybe before I come to that, let me just say this, Dibal. The issue of the constitutional audit is an important issue, and I think it's a topical matter we need to discuss as Kenyans. Because we've now done 12 years with the new constitution, the 2010 constitution. And I remember in the 11th parliament, when Honorable Mutaba Musimi was chair of Budget and Appropriations Committee. Yeah. We, as a committee, actually, we initiated a process to audit the constitution. We had a team which looked at the constitution then, and the chair was the former Auditor General, Mr. Ouko. Yeah, he was the chair of that committee. And I remember we had only done about, that time we had done about only 6 years, actually.
Yes.
We had done about 6 years of the Constitution. And even as at that time, if you get the report, you see there were fundamental issues which were raised in terms of our Constitution. And one is what we are discussing. The number of members of parliament, when you compare with the population of the country. Is it really the right number? That was a question. Is it time we said we are overrepresented, and then there is need to look at the whole area of representation? Another issue which came out at that time was the issue of the Senate, whether the Senate was necessary. And you'll be surprised at that time, Kenyans did indicate that the Senate was not necessary, and the position of the women rep was also declared not necessary at that time. That was the report or recommendations. The other thing which came also at that time was the issue of our governance structure.
Yes.
Because people realized that even though the ministers are outside parliament, it was almost like impossible to get sufficient answers from our fellow colleagues. You know, you have a chair of administration and national security. When you ask a matter related to security, and you know those are the majority of the questions, then your colleague, who is a comes and answers, responds to your question. And then you have a supplementary question. You find the whole process collapses. Because now it's like you have to be saying, give me more 2 weeks to go and consult again. But now the fundamental question is, now in a situation where we open the doors for the ministers to come to the House, does that really change then our governance structure, the architect of our governance structure? And if that's so, then if you look at the Constitution, such a situation might require that you actually go to a referendum, because you are now touching on the structure of the governance.
Yes.
And these are the questions. Now, when they come to the House, ministers come to the House, I know our speaker and the speaker panel where Honorable Farah sits, they will be spearheading this matter so that we get the standing orders changed. But now, the question is, when they come now to the House, are they going to sit with us where we sit? Or are they going to be at the bar where the CS treasurer normally stands when he's reading the budget to us, the budget statement? So to me, there are some very, very basic questions we need to answer. But all said and done, I think really the issue of whether ministers should be in the House or not, I think it is good that they were there to answer the questions. Because it's obvious that we have inadequacies when questions are being responded to by either a member of parliament who is a chair of a committee or a deputy chair of a committee or whatever position you want to give him at that point, that they don't have what it takes to answer questions. And the most important question is the issue of accountability. And I think I've raised this matter in this debate again. We are saying, you know, ministers now have been appointed by the president. And we are saying, as a House, we want to hold them accountable. And I like the statement Honorable Farah is raising the issue of he doesn't even know some of the ministers. I can tell you for sure, if you ask most of the majority of the members of parliament, they will not be able even to say the names of the ministers. If you look at your own analysis of, because at times I also follow the papers, that when you analyze the performance of the ministers, I'm telling you very few Kenyans would be able to say the names of the ministers. In the earlier days, the days Honorable Farah is talking about when we were in school, you could actually often say who are the ministers at that point. You would be able to mention the names and where they come. You remember that map of Kenya where you would have the ministers fixed in different corners, wherever they come from. You could be able to say the names.
In primary schools and secondary schools.
You remember that? And we knew them by names.
So you have the ministers, where they come from, and their ministries as well.
Yeah, the ministries. These days, I'm telling you, not many of us will even be able to say.
Even the MPs don't know who the ministers are.
So I think really this is a matter we need to discuss, and I think if you tie that the battle with now the issue of the constitution audit, maybe it's time we did the audit, and then put the right legal framework to allow ministers to come to the House without really coming through the back door. In that case, then we'll have a situation where if they need to amend anything, we amend it. We agree as Kenyans. We need to amend this so that we get it right. Because, you know, we adapted the presidential system of governance, but to some extent we are also tied to our earlier system. It's like a mixed thing, but then
it's not working.
We pretend to be presidential, purely presidential system,
But we have a mix of our parliamentary.
But practically, we are not. We are saying we should. And I really like it because the issue of accountability is very critical, because you ask yourself, if I were a minister today in Kenya, would I be more, in terms of loyalty, where would my loyalty be? Is it with the appointing authority or with the legislature? Obviously, so even when you summon a minister to come to the house, they know even if they don't come, you might not have much.
You can do.
You might not have much to do, and these are the issues. So for me, constitutional audit might be the right time to do it.
Indeed. All right, we want to take a short break right now. Of course, the question that is popping up right now is all about the constitutional constitutional audit. Right, it's been over 10 years right now, and there is very good reasons on why we should hark back and see how the performance of the Constitution has been as well so far. We're going to take a short break right now. When we circle back, we have also with us Isaac Mwaura, who's just joined us. And we'll continue pace on the other side of the break with him to just get a feel and flavor of where he has been, what is his input as far as the constitutional audit is concerned. And looking at the dailies as well, the man in the spotlight right now, the man in the spotlight is Musalia Mudavadi, man to watch as Ruto tweaks roles. This is what the Star is saying this morning. We have also the People Daily talking about Mudavadi, Ruto's real power man. And also we have Taifa Leo as well, Mudavadi Apanda Bay. And this is all about reorganization that we had yesterday with the executive order from the president. We are looking at that. What does it mean? Is there a supremacy battle between him and the deputy president? Or this also is a making of the media, as they will say? And we have a very interesting editorial cartoon that has been put forward there by Stallone in the People Daily this morning. We shall look at that. Don't go away. You're watching Siasa Fiesta here on Morning Prime. Time for us.